So what's on deck?
We're talking about how we invest. Sean, this is really your brainchild. So I'm gonna throw this over to your side
Throw
of
it
the
back
room.
at Sean.
I wouldn't say it's how we invest, but answering the question of how can one apply the principles of their faith into the investment selection process.
Welcome to the Your Life podcast, where we talk about how to integrate the virtues into our life and our finances. My name is Anthony De Lazzari, Associate Investment Advisor.
Sean Gregory, Portfolio Manager.
AJ Sanson, Associate Investment Advisor.
We are with Serviam Capital at I Private Wealth, and our goal is to serve you so that your finances may serve your goals and your goals may serve the good.
From our point of view, the starting point in that process is asking ourselves the question, with every business we're looking at, is what they do good, useful, and productive? Yeah.
Well, okay, but I think even starting there, like saying, is this company good, useful, and productive, takes a different view from potentially many other investors who just say, is this company going to give me a return? Right? We're not starting off on what can I get out of this, but what is the world getting out of this company existing? And I think that's a very good way of viewing it, things, because you're already starting off with something that is beyond yourself. Something that is like, is this objectively good rather than just, can I get something out of it? Like, it's a different worldview from the start there.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. If we examine everything we can about a business, and we acknowledge that you cannot know everything, you cannot know absolutely everything a company has ever done, and potentially everything they've ever done right or wrong. So we recognize in humility that there are limitations to what we can know, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to know as much as we can.
We should aspire to know as much as we can.
Yeah. So we do the hard work of investigating a company, finding out as much as we can reasonably about what they do, their different business lines, products they sell, how they conduct themselves as a business, right? Because this group of people, they're going to be using our money for some purpose. So we want to know, to what ends will it be used? Are they going to be building up the world in a positive way? Is my capital working towards the good, enabling, promoting human flourishing? Or is it going to be squandered on a useless or potentially, from our point of view, immoral business activity? So if we go through the three parts of that question, is this company good, useful, productive? Each of them has a very specific criteria. So good is really the question of your moral code. And so for us, from our point of view, we rely heavily on Catholic social teaching and the doctrine of the church to tell us what is good and what is not good.
So what do we look for when we're looking at companies?
So when we are starting to ask ourselves this question, is this company doing something good? We start with the moral question. Is this company doing something immoral? There are three categories that we look at. The first is sanctity of life. Second is dignity of the human person. And third is care for a common home. So under sanctity of life, we look at, does this company make, distribute tools, products, procedures that violate the sanctity of human life? We look at defense companies, and there are certain, we say controversial weapons that are made solely for the purpose of mass killing, and now those are landmines and nuclear weapons. So we avoid those activities completely. Under the umbrella of dignity of the human person, there is adult entertainment, usury, poor working conditions, unjust wages, just to name a few examples. And under care for our common home, we look at resource companies. Are they engaged in the extraction of their commodity in a responsible way? Do they have high health and safety standards for their employees? Do they have a track record of environmental disasters, not cleaning up after a project is finished, and all those sorts of things?
Yeah. Also checking for like greenwashing, virtue signaling, all that, because that can definitely happen.
And I think the point is that we should live a coherent and ordered life.
Yeah. Unified life.
Unified life, right. And that our finances should be in agreement with our values, the values we carry out in the world. We should be able to express those in how we use our money and how we invest our money. So that's the question of good. Useful. Does this company do something useful? There are many companies in the world that are not doing anything immoral or evil or bad, but we would not say is particularly useful. And one that comes to mind is companies in the luxury goods sector. Is that we do not usually, these things are not particularly useful. It's not that they're bad. It's not the people who buy them are bad or doing something wrong. It's not that these companies shouldn't exist. But when we think about allocating capital, we want to put it to good use in the world. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, no, I'd agree. We've had a number of conversations because a couple of companies have done quite well in years past, but you kind of wonder like, why are these companies doing well? It's well because what people are paying for kind of plays off the human vices of pride and vanity. Yeah.
But I mean, there's an element to consider with luxury goods, is which there's an element in which to produce something very
beautiful.
Good.
Yes, and I will agree with that. Like the craftsmanship is outstanding, but in certain companies that we've looked at, like as an example, an SUV that costs $800,000. I love the brand
and love the sound.
Yep, but that's just absurd what's being paid for, and that's not a productive use of capital. And so to be profiting off of a company that's producing something like that, we've said maybe that's not the best, right? Is like, because what are people paying for in that, right? Not only are we benefiting from people paying for that, but there's also other people who are not getting something that is rightfully otherwise potentially theirs. You know what I mean? Like if I spend an absurd amount of money on a certain good, well, now I have less money to put towards other things. And as we always come back to, like, capital is meant to be put to good use. So if I'm not putting a substantial amount of capital to good use, then I'm not only am I wasting that, but I'm also not able to do more good with it. It's kind of like a double-edged sword in that way.
Yeah, so those would be the criteria we look at for companies when we are thinking about companies to avoid. Now, there's the other side of the question is, which companies do we prioritize? And it's the mirror image. Companies doing something good, useful, and productive, building up the world in a way that enables people to live their lives in a better way, right? Supplying natural gas to someone's home so they can heat their home and live in comfort in the winter, we think is a great thing. Making machines that can make agricultural production more efficient is a good thing. It's a useful thing. It's a productive thing. It goes right to the heart of doing work for the benefit of people.
What I wanted to mention is that what you're calling out is to create a consistency, and you had referred to it earlier, Anthony, a unity. Mm-hmm. So finding how we live our lives to invest our money in accordance that aligns with those same values. Essentially, we have an opportunity that, as everyday people, we're not in politics where we could influence a particular policy, but we can indirectly in terms of how we spend our money, but also in our particular case, how we invest our money. So essentially, we are saying we want to allocate a portion of our capital towards these particular companies because we think that they're doing good things. And so it's trying to create a world for the future, for our kids, in which is better alignment of that. So as opposed to prioritizing just profits and not caring, and we've talked about this in a previous episode, is to take a little bit more due care, and that's what we're proposing in our engagement, is to care a little bit more, to go into a little bit more of insight of, are these good companies that also have the opportunity to create growth in terms of us accomplishing the opportunity to provide for our families and to give away, but just take a little bit more consideration for that in building a portfolio.
Yeah.
A misconception I think a lot of people
I was
might
going to
have.
ask what are some of the big misconceptions that people have, yeah.
Oh, okay. I hope you have some because I only have one.
Okay, yeah, no, well, I think, yeah, we can definitely go offline.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that, okay, this sounds like some sort of ethical investing, therefore you must be looking for companies that are only doing these like great and wonderful things. And I would say no.
Yeah, we'll invest in garbage companies. Those are, we think that is like a legitimate good thing to be looking at.
I think basic things, but necessary things, done well, are great things in themselves. Right. So they don't have to be flashy. They don't have to be these
The next big
idealistic,
idea.
these pie in the sky sort of ideals, but the basic things,
You could do the ordinary things really
the
well.
ordinary things of life, providing like that enable our like society to function in a better, more productive, more comfortable way. Like those things are great because they're so essential and because of their basicness. It's not a word.
But the undervalued in terms of like the attention that it receives, just the basic things that we take for granted, but do those things quite well for us to live well.
The very normal, the very regular, but the very useful things.
Yeah. Other frequently asked questions. AJ, I don't know if you have any, then I can kind of close.
No, you go first.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, I think, Sean, to your point, when people will ask, oh, this is a restriction on what you're able to invest in. And as a restriction, you must not be able to invest in certain companies that do super, super well. And in response, typically it's actually not that, because I think the norm is to just hold the market, whatever that is, and that ends up being very overweight a certain country that, actually does end up having a lot of these companies that we don't think are actually doing very good things, or their business practices are just not in alignment at all with Catholic social teaching. And that's one thing that people don't typically look for when they're screening these companies is what are these companies doing from a business practice standpoint?
Yeah. Well, the question is completely unrelated to the emphasis we're placing here. It might be true if we asked ourselves this question about companies and we were left with such a short list of businesses that had no prospects of the future. Yeah, we would definitely be left with poor returns, but that's not the case.
Yeah.
People are able to easily think of the biggest companies in the world. They get the most news time. It's what has highest representation in the index. And people either don't realize or forget that there are thousands of even just publicly traded companies in North America. And then you add in Europe, and you add in Asia, and Australia.
South America.
There are no shortage of businesses that we can apply this emphasis to prioritize certain things and prioritize things we're avoiding. And the question of return has to do with what is the price you paid for a business and what is the future success of that business. Which, after we ask ourselves this question, is this company doing something good, useful, productive? Then we go through the very prudent, arduous analysis of thinking about those questions.
Yeah.
What is this company? What do they do? What are their prospects for the future? How profitable is it? What is a fair price for me today that I think there's a high probability of achieving a meaningful return? But that question of return is unrelated. And as it stands for us now, November 24th, 2025, we have no shortage of companies to select from that fulfill this criteria, that we find doing something good, useful, productive in the world, that are trading at fair prices, that do have prospects for growth and are profitable, and all of those other, for us, secondary considerations. Not secondary in that they're unimportant, but that they do come after we ask ourselves the primary question. But once we have greenlit a company that it does qualify, then comes the hard work of all of the analysis and that's where a person can make a difference in returns.
I think the concern of whether or not a return can be produced from, let's call it this restriction that is applied, I think is really rooted in comfortability. Because many people are just so used to investing with the big names that represent the index. And so they think that there can be a thought process, well, if everyone's doing it, then I should also be doing it too, and look at the returns they're producing. So I guess what we're saying is it is possible to find good, productive companies and still find an opportunity for growth.
Mm-hmm. And it is essentially a criteria, but in saying something must be useful, that means it has economic value. If it has economic value and it's a well-run business, it will be profitable and it will have return for shareholders.
Yeah. I think where it can get misconstrued is when people think, so you're going to be investing in a company that puts half their profits towards charity. It's like, Not necessarily, because that might actually not be the best use of shareholder capital. Like, at the end of the day, it is still a company's responsibility to create the best product possible. And I know, Sean, you had this discussion around this time last year when we had a session at Glenwood. And fundamentally, it is a company's purpose to create a good product. It's not to deliver returns to shareholders, and it's not to consider all stakeholders. The easiest thing to do is to create a good product. How do you do that? Well, it is by charging a fair price. It is by paying your employees a good wage. It is by having proper corporate governance structures, by looking after the environment, all these different things. At the end of the day, what are you delivering? What are you exchanging? It's a product. And so that's in essence the first touch point that we're looking at is what the company is doing? Was their output good, useful, and productive? And then once we have that screener, then we say, okay, it's a good company. What is its price? Is it too expensive? Is it inexpensive? And that's where we have our models and we have our professional competence.
Yeah. I would argue that a good company should not give away any meaningful, significant amount of money to charity. They should dividend that money to their shareholders so that their shareholders can decide causes that they want to support that are important to them.
Yeah, which goes back to this idea of subsidiarity, which is the lowest possible competent authority should be responsible for making those decisions. Because who knows how to better spend your money than you? You shouldn't be entrusting somebody else to do that.
Now, it's not to say that a company cannot do good things in the communities in which they operate.
100%.
And that is an important thing to do. But it is secondary to running their business and running the business really well.
I'd agree with that, is that the efforts and the mindset of this company should be doing whatever they're doing. Do it especially well. Strive for excellence.
Yes,
is what
exactly. Yeah, pursue excellence
and put those resources towards that.
Yeah.
And how better can you help a community in which you operate than by being very profitable and being able to hire a lot of people and to be able to share that profitability through wages and sponsoring local hockey teams. And you could say it's kind of charitable, but also building up goodwill and brand recognition and advertising. And there are small nuanced ways in which companies can do those sorts of good things without necessarily being charitable giving.
Any other frequently asked questions about this morality and investing thing? I think the essence of the point that I want to make there is not a restriction when you take it down to its core, and instead of saying, it's a moral thing that we can only avoid stuff, it does conceptually become a restriction. Whereas I think the way that we view it is we integrate Catholic social teaching into the principles of our investment analysis and how we view the world and capital.
Priorities to focus on.
Yeah,
as opposed to thinking about it in restrictions and things that we can avoid. The biggest questions are, so you must have to give up returns.
Yeah.
Or you must not have a lot of ideas. And that just comes from people who are not engaged in financial markets, not very engaged, to know that the number of businesses is extremely large.
I think go ahead.
No, you finish your thought. I just had another thought.
So you had mentioned this earlier in terms of the concern and consideration. It's like, this process sounds way too hard. Why even bother? Is one of the objections.
Yeah.
That
sounds
we
like a
have.
sales pitch, AJ.
Not intended that way, but I mean, some people's like, it's too hard of a task. Let's just not bother. Let's succumb to like the generally acceptable mechanisms of investing, as opposed to we take on this work. It is hard because it is good.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. A person should not do that if they do not know what they're doing. But for us, like, we have the experience and the knowledge, the capability to do it, and it's still a full-time job.
Yeah.
So it is difficult, but doesn't mean it's not worth doing.
Sean, you had another thought?
Yeah. So the other thought I have is when we bring this up with people, typically one of the responses might be, okay, you're saying I shouldn't invest in company ABC. Does that mean I should also not buy their product anymore?
Yeah.
To which I would say it does not mean that. That there is a material distinction between being a customer of a business and being a shareholder in the business.
Should we also preface this by saying this typically comes from companies who in their business practice do not run things very morally. For example, a computer company that donates to organizations that we do not see as upholding the sanctity of human life is a company that we would not invest in. That being said, their computer product is still a very good product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as long as the product itself
is not immoral
for any reason, then it is not immoral to be a customer of the company, even though something else in their business might contradict your faith or morals.
And similarly, if a company has different lines, like for example, if it's a cable provider who, you stream from for sports, that's one thing. But if they're also selling adult entertainment, we're not going to invest in that because we're getting returns from all of that, and that's immoral. Whereas,
customer, you just pick the one product. Yeah,
exactly.
There are like different layers of why I think it's different, but one is often we don't have the same choice as a customer that we do as an investor. So if you're going to buy a computer, for one example, you're going to buy a computer that runs Windows or buy a computer that runs the Apple operating system. Yeah. There is not a lot of other choice. So if a person didn't like those companies, they would have to live without a computer, which is pretty unfeasible in today's world. But the computer itself is not bad. So you buying the computer is not itself an immoral action. For example, the question could be posed in this way. You order a pizza delivered to your home. The man delivering the pizza opens the door, and you can smell, or you can obviously tell that there are all sorts of, let's say illicit drugs being used. And you ask yourself in the moment, should I tip him? And I think very likely he's going to use it to, for poor ends. You should still buy the pizza and you should still tip him because the worker deserves his wages. He delivered a service to you and he deserves just compensation. What he does with it after is
of his own free will.
It's not on you, on your shoulders. And so it's the same thing as being a customer of a business. Yeah. Now, I would say if you had like-for-like product and you knew one company engaged in certain practices you did not agree with and another company didn't have that issue, then yes, obviously you would want to choose the company that was more aligned with how you see the world. But in the absence of an equivalence, there isn't the same moral dilemma to being a customer. Yeah. The other part about being a shareholder is that, as you said, Anthony, you benefit from everything the company does.
Yeah.
All the ways in which they are profitable. And you're an owner of that business. You are technically bear some responsibility for all of their other corporate actions. So if any of it's immoral that you know about, then we would say there's a moral pressure for you to not invest in that company. And then the second big difference is that there is so much choice. Is that if you cannot find a company that manufactures computer operating systems that you do not like, you do not have to invest in those companies. Nobody is forcing you to or demanding that you to. There is no necessity for you to do that. There are many, many other industries, other technology companies that you can find to replace them. So the question is completely different. The scale and the choice is completely different.
I think what you're bringing up is the proximity to the profits, essentially, is if it doesn't align with your values, then you're kind of partaking in that immoral means of producing that profit. So an opportunity to keep that in consideration, to distance yourself with that in selection of other companies that perhaps there's a better suit in alignment with your values.
Here's a question. What level of significance in terms of revenue, in terms of business, constitutes divestiture or not investing in a company?
So different people have different answers to this question. My answer is if I can find anything immoral, I would not invest.
Yeah.
Zero tolerance.
I would have zero tolerance. From what I can reasonably find out with a material amount of effort, if I can find anything I would say is immoral, I would not invest in that company. Now, different groups in different documents can have different levels of thresholds, but our policy is zero tolerance.
Yeah. And I think part of that comes from the fact that we are smaller. So if, let's say, like there's a small line item that is just like such an insignificant portion of revenue, but you're able to make a sizable enough investment that you can say, hey, we're not going to invest if this line item is there. If you get rid of that, then we will invest. I think that's a big piece of this as well, because as somebody who is representing morally conscious investors, being able to have a pool of investable assets and going to companies and saying, hey, we'd love to invest you. Like as a company, we think most of what you're doing is great, but this little item down here that's profiting off of whatever, that I think has to go. Being able to advocate is a very, very good thing to be able to do. And especially,
it's not just a good thing, it's a necessity.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's a moral obligation, actually.
It's an obligation, yeah. If you own a material amount of the business.
Yeah.
Now, for most small investors, they own such an insignificant amount of any business that their voice has zero bearing.
Yeah.
In which case, there is no obligation to voice that or to try to inflict change or try to impact change because you really can't.
Yeah.
But for large investors, institutions, foundations that do have that frame of mind, yes, they are behooved absolutely to try to impact a company with their shareholder votes.
Yeah. And so I think the answer to that would be because we're small, yeah, zero level of tolerance because we can't do too much. In the future, though, it would be quite magnanimous to be able to, talk to certain companies and say, hey, we'd love to open a position, but come on, why is this line item here? What are you actually profiting
especially
from?
the opportunity in which we can advocate on behalf of those who share these values, that we have a larger collective voice to make sure there's a better alignment.
Yeah.
There are all sorts of side benefits that flow from first asking the question, is this company doing something good, useful, and productive, as opposed to first asking yourself, will this company earn me a higher return? And it comes back to something we've talked about before, which is what we think is a better way to think about, conceptualize allocating capital, is that if you think about capital allocation as a means of building up the world in a positive way, as opposed to, and as returns as a byproduct of doing that well, we think you become a better investor. Not only that, we think it actually helps you achieve better results. Returns are fickle. The economy is cyclical, businesses are cyclical, returns, share prices up and down, and if that's what you're there for, I think a person will be more likely to make what we would say are behavioral mistakes in investing. Share price is up and they're chasing momentum, and share price is down and they panic sell. And it happens all the time. But for someone who's there first for something else, they have the longanimity to endure downturns in the business cycle because they can see there's a higher purpose. There's a
good reason beyond return.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank
to be in that company.
Yeah.
And same thing when things go up and you're like, oh, do I sell now? So ride it. See what happens. Yeah.
Right.
Anything else?
I think that's it.
Brilliant. Thank you for listening. I'm Anthony.
I'm Sean.
Hey, Jay.
This podcast has been prepared by Sean Gregory, who is a portfolio manager, AJ Sanson, and Anthony De Lazzari, who are associate investment advisors for IA Private Wealth Inc. Opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the portfolio manager and investment advisors only, and do not necessarily reflect those of IA Private Wealth Inc. IA Private Wealth Inc. is a member of the Canadian Investor Protection Fund and the Canadian Investment Regulatory Organization. IA Private Wealth is a trademark and business name under which IA Private Wealth Inc. operates.